Ed Stasium is a musician, engineer, and producer with a career in music that spans almost 50 years. Getting his start at Tony Camillo's New Jersey studio, he went on to record Gladys Knight, the Ramones, Talking Heads, Living Colour, the Smithereens, Mick Jagger, and Motörhead, just to name a few. In this episode, Ed gets in-depth about recording Gladys Knight's Midnight Train to Georgia, his time with the Ramones, the first Talking Heads record, and his role in the building of New York's iconic power station. This is part one of a two-part interview.
Hey, Ed, I checked your wiki page, and I had no idea you worked on one of my favorite songs ever.
What's that?
Julian Cope, World Shut My Mouth.
We'll shut your mouth.
Whatever.
Right. That was a correction. That wasn't.
When that song came out, I think, would that come out in the late 80s?
86.
I was in England when that came out, working with Whitman with the outfield.
Oh, no shit.
It was huge there. And I loved that song. And I went home and bought the record. But then I went back and listened to his early Teardrop Explodes records.
Yeah.
He was fantastic. I mean, whatever. Was that fun working with him? He seemed like...
Oh, he was great. We had a fun time. He one of the... I don't know if it was World Shut Your Mouth. I don't remember what song it was, but he demanded that he stand on a Leslie speaker naked.
Yikes.
True story.
Now, was this for the record or was this for something else?
No, that was for the record.
I've heard a lot of Leslie stories. That's the best one yet.
Yeah, Julian Cope. Well, we can say it was World Shut Your Mouth. And he had this funny, weird microphone stand that it was his own microphone stand that he used to use in performance. It had stairs on it. He used to climb up on it and shit. So we set it up in front of the Leslie, and he got up there naked, bare naked, and sang.
Unbelievable.
That's what he wanted to do.
Okay,
He's written some very interesting books about who are those Stonehenge people?
The Druids.
The Druids. He's really into Druidism.
Wow.
He's way into Druidism. He's written 2 big books about Druid sites.
That's amazing.
And in the UK and on the continent. He's kind of an expert in this field. That's what he's turned into.
He was very extravagant and very like the hat and like Stuart. He's the whole deal, like English rock star. Mm-hmm. This guy was in 1986 an English rock star. He just carried himself that way. Great voice, great attitude, great melodies. Like the guy, Stuart, you'd have to hear this song, but I remember that was an earworm from me ever since. Like the 2 records in England that blew my mind were that record and the XTC. What was the one that ended up being a hit here, but it had the song Dear God, but it wasn't on the original version there. Dear God was an add-on here.
Oh.
Skylarking.
Yeah.
So anyway, but those are the 2 records.
So let's go back. Let's go way back, Ed. We're taking you back.
And the Wayback Machine.
We're taking you to Wayback Machine. So one thing that I did see that kind of blew my mind was Gladys Knight and the Pips.
Yeah, Gladys Knight and the Pips.
Oh, yeah. Midnight Train to Georgia, right?
And wow, did you have any idea when you were working on that it was...
No. Well,
no.
It was a great song. That was real early. I mean, that was... I had only done a few sessions previous to that, at Tony Camillo. He had a home studio. And, I started there in the summer of 72. And that's where I met Tony Bon Jovi. Tony Bon Jovi and Tony Camillo were partners in Venture Sound. They had a 4-track studio in Bound Brook, New Jersey. And then Tony Camillo was building a studio in his home. I mean, this is a whole other story, leading up to, how I got there. But...
yeah, so how did you get there?
Oh, Jesus. You want to go way back, don't you?
Yeah.
You want
I think it was the R train.
We had the Jersey Central. We didn't have any trains.
Okay, sorry.
We didn't have any trains. Geez, where do I start? It has to do with this cat, Mike Bonagura, who is a childhood friend. And there was a bass player in one of our garage bands. I was like 15. We used to rehearse in Sammy DeSalvo's garage, and Mike Bonagura lived across the street. I taught this kid, Mike, his first chords on a guitar. He's later on he's a writer. He lives in Nashville. He wrote a Marie Osmond, #1 tune. So I played in a couple bands with the cat. And the summer of 72, I had been working at Ampeg and Alltech.
Wow.
Alltech Lansing, University Sound, and Ampeg. I was working there when Ivana's dad was the president. Ivana Manley's dad was the president.
Oh, wow.
Of Ampeg. And I was, playing in bands. I got fired. I was living in my parents' basement with a baby, with young Jason, my son.
Yeah, the wonderful Jason.
Yes. And Stuart has worked with Jason.
Yes.
And
love Jason.
And like I said, I played with Mike in a couple bands, London Fog, blah, blah, blah. I was in bands. Bands were falling apart. I got fired from my job. I was living at my parents' house with Debbie and Jason. For some reason, I purchased a pair of bicycles. And we're popping around the neighborhood, and I run into Mike Bonagura, who says, Eddie, long time no see. Hey, how you doing? My dad knows this guy, Tony Camillo, who teaches at Alma White University. Tony Camillo was the music professor at Alma White College in Zarephath, New Jersey. Big Mike Bonagura was the English professor. They knew each other. They were friends. And he says, this guy, Tony Camillo, is building a studio. And it was called Belle Meade at the time, Somerville, New Jersey. So I was into recording. At this point, I had already done demos, which is yet another story going further back with Bob Margoloff as an engineer.
Wow.
At Media Sound in 1970. And Bruce Swedeen as an engineer in 1971 in Chicago. There's so many stories I got here.
So this is pre-Stevie Wonder for Bob Margoloff?
Right before Stevie Wonder. It was like November of 70.
Amazing.
And we the band got some kind of, we had a manager, Barry Landers. He was some kind of mover shaker dude. He was a radio guy, worked for WMCA radio in New York. And he got us a deal with Richie Havens' Stormy Forest Records. We did demos for them, and it was at Media Sound. We had a cat named Ted Barron producing. We rehearsed. They had a loft down the village, and the band, we would rehearse there, and got us time at Media Sound. And this cat, Ted Barron, was just like smoking weed and cigarettes and not really saying anything. And Margoloff took over the session, just like total producer cat. He was the assigned engineer. It was on a Scully 12-track.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so, worked with Bob Margoloff, the great Bob Margoloff, early on, 1970. Then our manager started working, he was at MCA Radio, started working for the Yankees. He drove a Yankee logoed car as well, a Toyota or something. He drove it around. And he was friendly with the box seat people. He was like the A&R man of the Yankees, a PR dude. And there was a guy named Nat Tarnopol, whose dad had founded Brunswick Records. And so Nat was in charge of Brunswick Records. And they started talking. Barry Landers says, I manage this band. He said, oh, send them to Chicago. We'll make a record. He never heard us, never saw us, nothing. We just got a record deal, drove to Chicago in one car, all slept in the same Holiday Inn, brought our equipment with us, and the drums and everything piled in it was a Dodge or a Plymouth, like in 1960 or 61. It was, it broke down 3 times on the way there. It was overheating. And got in, and Bruce Swedeen was the engineer. And that's when I really was inspired. I was always into the recording. I had, a couple of stereo machines that I would bounce back and forth with. That's how I figured out how to do shit. And I asked Bruce a lot of questions. There was a console. He designed the room, and it was a 16-track.
Wow.
So that's, I'm like, yeah, this could work somehow. I got a spark, and Bruce was very friendly and cooperative and a wealth of knowledge. It was like, Ella Fitzgerald, Count Basie, Brandywine, this fucking band from New Jersey.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah. Wait, you guys were Brandywine.
We were Brandywine.
Yeah. I remember hearing that name when I was a kid.
There was probably a bunch of bands called Brandywine.
Oh, really?
I wouldn't be. Yeah, I would guess. I don't know.
Okay.
It was actually the manager's daughter was reading Lord of the Rings, and there were the Brandywine Mountains, so we thought that was groovy. And she ended up marrying the drummer Chip, who's a great friend of mine.
So you came back to...
Yes. Came back, got, Debbie gets pregnant, we get married, working at Ampeg, real job, and first working on the assembly line, then I got put over to the shipping department, And, it was exciting when the Stones were endorsing Ampeg at the time, and the Faces. And it was very exciting when the truck would pull up and all the Stones gear would come in for refurbishing because it was just beat to shit. And also the Faces gear came in, and I took a razor blade and, how you stencil, and Lori and Chip are huge Faces fans. And I cut it out with a razor blade and put it in a frame for them. I think she must still have it. Yeah. Anyway, so I get fired, run into Mike Bonagura, and I start hanging out at Tony Camillo's place. Go over there, nothing is. It's a mess. He has this carpenter called TJ is doing all the work. There's no glass. There was no floor. There was a Ampex MM1000 16-track collecting dust. The console was on the floor, and I helped Tony Bon Jovi and this guy Bob Steffen, who is a tech guy, kind of build a place. I made baffles with felt on them from fiberglass and built a drum booth. I put the floor in, helped put the glass in the control room, and I was collecting unemployment. I was like, this is amazing. I'm working in a fucking recording studio. When I first started, Tony Camillo was partners with Bon Jovi and Camillo, blah, blah. Two Tonys, hey.
Exactly, two Tonys. We know that one.
Two nice Italian boys.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Tony says to me one day, Eddie, why don't you come in to see a session with me at Media Sound? He was on staff at Media at this time, Tony was. 1972, summer. Come on in. He would take the bus in every day. I met him in New Brunswick. We got on the bus and went into Manhattan, Media Sound. And there was 2 sessions. At that time, Bob Walters, who later was involved with Power Station with Tony, Clear Mountain, Ed Evans, and myself in the very beginning. Bob Walters was the manager of Media Sound at this time. So it's a 2-session morning. I think it started at 11. And Bob Walters never would lock out. And it was always like 3-hour sessions. It was Kool and the Gang. And then in the evening, it was Buzzy Featon.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we go in. I help Tony set up, get the tracking going. We cut the track. It was before the Neves were in Media. I think there was a Spectrasonics console in there. We finished the tracking, and we're getting ready to do the vocal, set up for the vocal, and Tony's like, Eddie, I'm going to go get a sandwich. You do the vocal. And they're like, what the fuck, dude? Okay, and I had the hiccups. And all the cats, all the cats in the band and Kool and the Gang were like, we know all these cures for hiccups. I'm drinking water upside down, get a spoonful of sugar and put it on my tongue and all these, and had the hiccups for like an hour. I swear to God, because I was nervous.
Right.
And then Tony leaves to go get what kind of sandwich you want. And I said, liverwurst on rye with mustard. And Tony leaves, and okay, I'm figuring he's going to come right back. No, he didn't come right back. Okay, so he did a vocal. It was all set up. I remember it was going through a LA2A and maybe a Pultec. And he says, okay, that's good. Let me do another track. And I'm like, okay. And this is what I'm just starting to work with multi-track. Tony must have briefly explained to me the patch bay. This is this. So I calmly figured out, okay, let's go to the next track. It was a 16-track machine. Okay, whatever track it was, I don't remember, 13, 14, so, okay, this is the input to 14. I plugged it in. Okay, let's do some horns now.
Oh, shit.
And we did some horns, did the horn section. Had to set up, the microphone and, one mic, used one mic, probably used the same mic. It was probably a 67 or 87. And got it done. And this goes on for 2 hours. Let's do a rough mix. Bob Walters walks in the room. Bob Walters, he's a very cordial guy. Always had a suit and tie on. Saying hi. Hey, hi, Kool. How you doing? He knows all the guys in the band because they were on Delight Records. I remember, but he was friendly with the guys. He made sure Bob Walters always knew the clients, and he said hi to everybody. And he looks at me and goes, "Who are you? Where's Tony?" And as if on cue, the door opens, and here's Tony Bon Jovi. Eddie, here's your sandwich. Here's your sandwich. And Bob's like, who's this guy? What's he doing? And Tony's like, Oh, it's my friend Eddie. He's a great engineer. Yeah, trust him. He's great. He's great. I had to go out and do something. He was gone for 2.5 hours to get a sandwich next door. Yeah, yeah. And Bob Walters is like, oh, cool. Okay, boom. And that's how I got thrown in the pool.
Amazing.
Yeah, pretty crazy. So,
That's a good Tony Bon Jovi imitation, by the way.
Thank you.
Where do you go from there? I mean, talk about a first day of recording is like,
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, we did a couple sessions with Tony. I remember. This is a funny story. Holland Dozier Holland, Tony Camillo. Bon Jovi. You probably know the story about him going to Motown. Figured out all this stuff about their recording, and
Right.
I guess their engineer Barry Gordy brought him in, and he also wanted Tony Camillo to come in to do arrangements. So they got tight with Holland Dozier Holland. So I don't remember the artist, but there was a session that Tony was going to engineer. We had, and this is after a couple months, probably September or October of '72. I was very excited. Holland Dozier and Holland are coming to the studio to do background vocals. That's all I remember about the session. I don't remember who sang. It may have been those New York gals like Linda November, and I don't remember all their names.
I remember Linda November.
We all remember Linda November.
Yeah, from my jingle days in '88.
Oh my God, yeah, the jingle queen.
Unbelievable. The biggest fur coat I've ever fucking seen. And it was July.
Yeah.
that's why they called it November.
Yeah, no, it's cold. Yeah.
No, but seriously, she walked in like, fucking like royalty. It was the craziest thing.
She calls herself the Empress.
Okay, there you go.
She still does. I'm
Unbelievable.
Facebook friends with her.
Are you really?
Yeah. Yeah, she's on Facebook.
Oh, that's so fucking funny.
Yeah, she's on there somewhere.
So funny.
So, okay. So, the day of the background vocal date, Tony says to me, hey, go pick up Holland Dozier Holland at the plaza. Okay. I have a beat up 1967 Ford Galaxy with no air conditioning.
Nice.
And Tony says, go pick up Holland Dozier Holland. He probably said to them, I'll have a car waiting for you.
He didn't say anything about air conditioning.
Didn't say anything about air conditioning or a beat up, a fucking hippie driving a beat up, 67 Galaxy without air conditioning. So I go in, I park out front, I go in, they're waiting in the lobby. I was late probably. And I said, I'm here to pick you up. And they kind of look at me kind of funny. Here's this fucking hippie, in jeans and dingo boots, whatever the fuck I had on. And I bring them outside and they look at the car and they're like, what the fuck? They didn't say it, but the expression on their face was like, what? And there were four of them. They had some other cat with them. I don't remember who the other guy, but it was Holland Dozier Holland and their assistant. And we had to pile into this car and drive all the way to New Jersey, which was a good hour drive, in this sweating with the windows open. And it's like 95 degrees out. And
right. Lincoln Tunnel.
Yeah, Lincoln Tunnel, all that stuff, the turnpike all the way down to Somerville.
So good.
Crazy. And we did the session. Tony engineered that. And shortly after that, something went down between Camillo and Bon Jovi. I don't know what. They ended up resolving it within the last day. Well, Tony Camillo passed away about 2 or 3 years ago. And I believe they resolved their friendship after all those years. But they had some kind of shootout, man, and he was gone. Tony was no longer there. So I jumped into the engineering chair.
Wow.
He left the studio. I'm sitting in the chair. I'm an engineer, officially an engineer. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I still don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea. I turn knobs.
That's pretty much it goes across the board for all of us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a qualification for getting on Gear Club.
Yeah, so, I'm all of a sudden in the engineer's chair, and Tony Camillo has a relationship with Neil Bogart. Loved Tony Camillo's stuff.
Nice.
Casablanca.
Before that, he was at Buddha.
Right.
He was at Buddha, and that's when I met him. Went into his office several times. It was really nice. He's smoking weed in his office back then. It's like, whoa, dude, what's this about? So we were doing some records for Buddha. There was a A&R guy, Cecil Holmes, and we did a couple records with him. They were instrumental hits. The first one was called The Black Motion Picture Experience. Okay, and we had all these great cats playing. Alan Schwartzberg would play drums. Steve Gadd would play drums. We'd have Bob Babbitt on bass. Andrew Smith playing drums. We had like this little group of studio people, and Tony's sessions were always like 3 guitars: Bobby Mann, Jerry Friedman, Jeff Mirnoff. Pat Rebelo on keyboards, Barry Miles on keyboards. He would cut all live. We had electric piano, acoustic piano, 3 guitars, bass, and drums for all the rhythm sections, always the same. So when and Tony got this thing to do Gladys Knight, and I remember they got the sheet music from a publisher. It had already been changed from Midnight Plane to Houston to Midnight Train to Georgia.
No shit.
Wow.
By Sissy Houston did that song first. And they changed it to Midnight Train to Georgia.
Wow. From
Midnight Plane to Houston. It's about Farrah Fawcett and Lee Majors, believe it or not. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Jim Weatherly was on the phone. He was pals with Farrah Fawcett. He called her late one night, in one evening, and her and Majors were splitting up or something. And she says, "Yeah, I'm taking the Midnight Plane to Houston." And he wrote the song.
It's amazing that one of the funkiest R&B songs of all time is about Farrah Fawcett.
About the whitest people ever made.
Seriously. Yeah, man. Oh, yeah.
So tracking that.
We tracked it.
You tracked it with the full band?
We tracked it twice with the full band. And Gladys is like, "Nope, this ain't right. It doesn't sound right." We'd make a rough mix, send her, 1/4 inch, 7.5 IPS, rough mix of it. And then she didn't like either of those with the full band. So Tony calls us up on a Sunday, and it must have been, again, the summer '73. It was a hot day, and it was a short date. Tony played a Wurlitzer, and Bob Babbitt played bass, and Andrew Smith played drums. And Jeff Mirnoff played guitar. Jeff Mirnoff had been at the beach all day. It was on a Sunday. He came in sunburned as hell, I remember. putting him in. We had a little booth that we put him in. And we cut the track. And Tony added like Hammond organ to it. And then we did the strings and horn section. And Gladys had said that she wanted to be more of an Al Green kind of thing. More of an Al Green vibe. So that you can, if you actually listen to that, call me. Listen to the Al Green vibe. And I remember when Tony was doing the arrangement, he would do it all by ear. Tony Camillo is a musical genius kind of cat. He'd sit at his piano and then write out all the parts on sheet music. And then I would have to run to the copyist like halfway up Route 22 somewhere. Cat's name was John. I don't remember his last name. So I remember him listening to Al Green stuff and doing the charts. And that day, on that Sunday, and he wrote the charts out, and then the guys came in like in the evening, 6, 7 o'clock, and we cut the track, sent it to Gladys, and she loved it. So
was that your first big radio hit?
It was, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So what was it like when you find all of a sudden it's a worldwide smash?
Well, it was crazy. It was kind of crazy. It was what a great feeling to hear your record. I'm thinking of all these other stories.
Go wherever you want to go, man.
Yeah.
We're with you.
The first time I was on a plane was when I went to record Gladys and the Pips doing the vocals for Midnight Train.
Where did you go? Where'd you do that?
Artie Field's studio in Detroit.
Wow.
Yeah. And I got there.
It was an afternoon plane to
Detroit.
Yeah. First time I was on a plane. And doing vocals. There was a scratch vocal that Tony did, I think. And so we did the background vocals. But I get in there, they were doing something, we would get it together. Gladys would always have hot water and lemon before she would do a vocal. A lemon. She'd chew on a lemon. It was wild. And she says, "Okay, I'm ready to do a vocal." She wanted to sing. I was used to people running it down and getting a vocal level. It wasn't going to happen with Gladys. I just got that vibe. She wanted to sing. She wanted to go out there. So I just basically guessed at that vocal level, the attenuation, and I put it in an LA2A, and it was a 67 or an 87, I don't remember, and she just sang, and I just left it, and it was a one-take vocal.
Are you kidding?
No.
Thank fucking God you got it right?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
One-take vocal. We punched in one line somewhere in the vamp. I've got to go. One of those somewhere.
And then you took it back and mixed it?
We we finished the vocal. Then I brought it back, and she called up. Tony says, "We're going to be in New York. I want to do this line." So we went to Bell Sound in New York with the multi-track, with the 16-track, and punched in a line there.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, went to mix it. And Tony, this is a funny thing, 'cause I didn't know about phase cancellation or, disc cutting any. I still don't know about disc cutting. I leave that to our friend Greg Calby.
Yes, please.
Yes. Well,
It's his job.
yeah, it's his job, mastering. He was, at that time, had the lathe in the room. But Tony Camillo had done a tom-tom, and I had the tom-tom in the right side, and of course the bass and drums in the middle. It was a Langevin console. It was originally a 4-track console. There's no pan pots. It was just left, right, or center. And so I had the bass in the middle, and I had the tom-tom over on the right side. And I guess Tony tried to tune it to the track, but it wasn't quite in there, and there was one note. And because the bass was in the middle and this tom-tom was on the right, it created an oscillation and it wouldn't cut. The disc wouldn't take the disc wouldn't take it in the stereo cut.
Holy cow.
Yeah, and I what did I know? I didn't know, but that's what the guy explained it to me. So I had to go remix it again. That was my first mastering session ever. Had to go remix.
Did you put the bass on the side with the tom?
No, I put this. I should have. That would have been good, like a Ramones record. Yeah. So I put them both up the middle, and did a remix, and did a mono mix as well, and stereo and a mono, and boom, that was it. And then
That's amazing.
they rush released that fucker, and I'm doing dishes, and I have WABC on a little transistor radio, and here's Dan Ingram, and it's playing. And, I heard it for the first time, and it was just like, holy shit. This is, it was just such a great feeling
Yeah.
I wish I could have that feeling today.
Yeah.
Right.
But it was a good feeling to, hear a record on the radio. And I just started,
Right.
I had just started. And it was a big thrill.
Yeah,
Then it went to number one,
Amazing.
number one record worldwide. I was like 23 years old, something like that. I was a kid. And I didn't know what I was doing. I had no fucking clue. I just turned.
Yeah,
the
but
knobs.
there's something to the fact that the Tonys saw something.
Right.
They trusted you in the room, even though you were probably, shitting in your pants. They saw something that they knew was either musical, was probably from a musical point of view, that you had a past as a musician or were a musician and knew how to relate to players and knew about songs, and the stuff that you're not talking about probably was large part of what those guys saw in you. 'Cause they were like huge dudes. Why would they just frivolously take someone who, to your point, you didn't know what you were doing, but somehow they saw something in you.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yep.
Yeah.
Your career largely then went into like major rock and roll world, but it started in a heavy R&B thing.
Yeah, man.
And did you have a particular, like, did the rock and roll thing happen because that's what you wanted to do as a player, or it evolved, like the styles didn't matter, you just went where?
I enjoyed the R&B. I mean, when I was a kid, that's all I played, because it was like pre-Beatles.
Yeah.
I was doing Rufus Thomas songs and, James Brown songs, The Ventures, of course. I mean, they're white boys, but, I learned how to play guitar. My Ventures were first love, but when we started playing in bands, we're doing Walking the Dog, Midnight Hour. I'm just trying to think of early stuff. Hitchhike, Marvin Gaye's Hitchhike, I remember doing. So there was an R&B thing going on, but I always loved the rock. When the Beatles came out and, British Invasion, the rock really took me away. As a matter of fact, the rock was the reason that I left Power Station. We had another hit with a song called Dynamite by Bazooka. It was on A&M, by the way, going back to Tony Camillo. Dynamite! Steve Gadd plays drums on that. Dynamite! Another November vocal, by the way. Yeah.
Oh my God.
But, after 3 years of being there, it was routine. I was really in love with a lot of the British recordings. I always was. But when the stuff started coming out of Trident, I remember like the Harry Nilsson records and that Richard Perry did. They were done at Trident Studios, and the Carly Simon record that Richard Perry did, and it just had a great sound. And the Queen stuff, the early Queen stuff was done at Trident. And I went to an AES show in October of '75, and I got a copy of DB magazine. And in the back of DB magazine, they used to have want ads. And I had known that there was a Trident console at Le Studio, Morin Heights, just called Le Studio. It was the first Trident A series in North America. And Andre and the late great Nick Blagona put that studio together, the Le Studio Morin Heights, out in the country, beautiful place. And I had known about it. I knew about it. Matter of fact, there was an ad in one of the audio rags that had a fold-out picture of a Trident A series. And we had a little tiny shop in back of Camillo's. And I fucking put that fucker up, looking at it, going, oh, man, the Trident console. Because we had that Langevin console originally. Then we got an MCI, which was utilitarian, but it was kind of boxy. Boxy sounding,
mid-rangey,
yeah. A lot of great records were made on those consoles. It was an early one. I think it was a 416. That sounds right. We got a MCI 24 track at the same time. So I just had this great affinity for Trident Studios and the Trident console, and I saw an ad for Engineer One at Le Studio Morin Heights, 514-226-2419.
Come on.
I swear to God.
Wow.
It was one of those moments.
Wow.
And I went up, I called, I talked to Yael Brandis, who was Andre Perry's partner, still is. They've been together for forever.
That's amazing.
Lovely woman. And I literally flew up the next day on my first credit card. I flew up to Montreal. Yael picked me up. I had a meeting with them. She cooked lunch. I brought a stack of records with me that I had done. And
that's so cool.
They hired me on the spot. So I went up to the studio. I moved up there. I left Camillo. I gave Camillo. I said, "Hey, I'm leaving." He was pissed. I got my working visa. I got everything going. Well, and I moved up there.
But wasn't there all this work with Tony? Were you worried that you were leaving a happening scene? There were hit records coming out of there?
It was getting... Well, there was only 2 hit records, really. We were doing a lot of work. He was getting a lot of work. But it was the sameness of all the sessions. It was routine. It was cookie cutter.
Yeah.
Kick drum, snare drum, drums left and right, and then bass, 3 guitars, electric piano, acoustic piano, horns, strings, vocals, background vocals, percussion. And, it was a great experience, and I loved being there. I loved Tony. But it was just, I felt it was time for me to move on. And, Le Studio, Morin Heights was tempting. And I'm working on a Trident console up in the wilds of north of Montreal.
Wow.
I literally left within 2 weeks, and
It's amazing.
Yeah, well, it must have been, I think it was November 9th or something. It might have been a week. They said, come on up immediately. I rented a house. I got up there, got a house rented.
And what kind of work were they doing up there?
Well, at the time, Cat Stevens had just finished an album called Numbers, which Leanne Unger was a staff engineer up there. Who
Amazing.
now Leanne is now a professor at Berkeley. Mm-hmm. And Leanne was an engineer. Nick Blagona was up there. Nazareth had been recording up there. Mm-hmm. I remember Corky Lang being up there. And there was a lot of French-Canadian artists working up there. It was a beautiful place. It was beautiful. It was inside and out. Studer 24-track, Trident console, every piece of outboard gear, including an omnipressor. Which I loved. I had never had one, and that fucking thing was great. I loved an omnipressor. And first thing I worked on was Robert Charlebois, who's a big French-Canadian artist. I started working with a band called Lougarou, who changed their name to Garalou, which I ended up, my first actually produced gold record in Canada was with that band. So also, the Bee Gees came up there. It was really, I did a band called Roy Thomas Baker. I worked with Roy Thomas Baker up
Amazing.
there. Right after Bohemian Rhapsody was the big smash, the same time. So it was early 76, somewhere around there. Roy's coming in to do a band called Pilot.
I remember Pilot.
They had that big hit with Magic, which is used for some...
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It was such a great record. The album cover has all 3 of their faces, and they're looking in the distance, and they both have these like aviator scarves on. Like it's so like obvious. Okay,
Yeah.
they're pilots.
They're pilots. Yeah, great guys. Actually, I took a bunch of pictures, and they used my pictures for the gatefold and for the cover.
Really?
For the cover,
I love
yeah.
that record as a kid.
Yeah, well, it's called It's called Warren Heights. They named it after the studio. It's called Welcome to Warren Heights was the name of the album, and we recorded the whole thing there. And working with Roy Thomas Baker, and that was the first time I heard Bohemian Rhapsody. I hadn't heard it, and he had a quarter-inch stereo copy, and he put that on the monitors. And I was like, holy fuck shit, this is amazing. Heard it firsthand. And an interesting thing about, I had been of the school of really separating everything, putting blankets over guitar amps, having close mic to, a drum booth. And there was a drum booth at the studio. And Nick Blagona, my co-engineer on the project and, chief engineer at the studio, we had, the gear came before the band and Roy, and we had set up the drums in a drum booth. And when Roy came in the next day, we were all set up, ready to go. Mic check and everything. Roy's like, "What are those drums doing in the drum booth? Take them out of there and put them in this room and get some of this lovely room sound on there." Which was like, what? Room sound? Ambience? What's that? I didn't know. I'm still a kid.
But
Also,
but
you came from a studio that, like you're saying, there were 3 guitar players, 2 keyboard. You had to do that.
Yeah, man.
Right.
And
but also with Roy, he ended every sentence with "darling."
darling,
Right.
that's lovely, darling.
Get those drums back in the room, darling.
True. It's true. Have you worked with him?
No, I didn't. I grew up a huge Queen fan.
Yeah.
And I was fans of all his records like crazy. Like I saw them like every tour. But I had a day in L.A. That Whitman hooked up with me where I spent the day with Roy Thomas Baker and drove around with him looking at studios, and I felt like I had won a contest. It was the most awesome day. We left one studio, and he was like, "You know what the problem with that studio is?" And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "No flatware." And it was like the whole day was that shit. It was so amazing. And then I dropped him off. I forget if he was staying at the Montreal or a nicer hotel. But we had this great conversation. I walked him up to his hotel room, met his wife. They were
Barbara.
going to some, they were
Barbara.
going to some big event in the evening, and I was just going back to my hotel. But like we talked a little bit, and then I said goodbye, and it was really like one of those magical days in my life where I got to.
Do you know what record he was going to make? That he was, like, was he looking for a studio
I don't
for
know.
a particular?
I ended up not obviously. Yeah, he was. He was looking at studios, and I was hoping I'd be the engineer, but he had a guy he was working with at that point. It wasn't Jeff Workman. This is way after Jeff Workman was doing stuff with him. But like I said, the bottom line was I felt like I won a contest. I got to spend a day with him, driving him around. He also made fun of me because he criticized how all Americans drive because I was driving on all the expressways, taking him everywhere. And he just couldn't believe how slow I drove. So he would just say, "You Americans all drive like shit." And, totally not like an asshole. He was really actually hilarious. But
he was the funniest guy. He would do the weirdest things.
Yeah, never offensive. It was just hilarious. I mean, he could have called me a douchebag. I would have laughed my ass off. It was just so hilarious.
What a funny guy. He would do weird, strange things like, what would this fire extinguisher sound like if we blew it into this 414? Darling.
Right.
Do shit like that.
I love that so far part of like coming up being an engineer involves driving people.
All right.
Yeah.
You got
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely drove my Idol. That's for sure. I was so psyched. It was the craziest day of my life. It was so intense.
Man. No, it was inspiring working with Roy because from that point, I mean, he would be miking the back of amplifiers, back of a Marshall. He'd put, a mic down the hall, and I'm like, this is amazing. So all of my, which I incorporate to this day, I incorporate ambience room mics into my recordings, and it's because of Roy. I owe him
great.
that. I owe Tony Bon Jovi and Roy and Margoloff and Swedin.
quite an illustrious group of
man.
amazing
Yeah,
sonic geniuses.
You know, after I left the studio, and you know what else Roy inspired me to was to have my own splicing block. He had a briefcase with a splicing block in it. He had his razor blades and his editing block because he would edit, and I got my own editing block when I came back to the States. I remember. I still have it, of course. I have my editing block. The Bee Gees come in to the studio, which was really awe-inspiring. Carl Richardson was the engineer from Criteria, I believe. That's where they were working down there. And Albie Galutin was a producer. What great guys they were. You know, they were all there. Barry and I got along because we're both into like UFOs, and we traded books. I traded him my copy of The Interrupted Journey, about the first book about alien abductions in New Hampshire in the early 60s. A couple named Betty and Barney Hill. We just started talking about all this, you know, alien shit. Because Nick was actually the assistant engineer, and, you know, Carl was doing it. And let me tell you, their way of doing backing vocals, we worked on You Should Be Dancing was the first thing the first song we worked on. And they would go out there, Barry would double his voice like nobody's business, unbelievable. And then to do their backing harmonies, they would all do one part. They do like the low part, then they double it, then they triple it, then they bounce that all to one track. Then they do the mid harmony, and they'd all sing it together.
You know, that's so interesting because over the years, I've often, because I'm a huge fan of theirs, I've often gotten confused by who's singing what.
Right.
Yeah.
But that
same.
makes so much sense that
They're all singing it.
they're all singing it, right?
Did you guys see the documentary?
Yeah.
I haven't watched it yet.
You really should watch it. It's wonderful.
It's wonderful. Yeah.
No, I dug them too. And I remember 1910 mining disaster or whatever, you know, from the first record. And
I love that song.
In Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And I remember
Trafalgar.
And I remember loving those early records. And then when they went into the disco thing, I was just like, it's kind of cool. Like you said, main course.
Yeah.
Main course was being played in my house. But, you know, after that, you'd play like King Crimson or Yes or the Beatles or the Stones. But main chorus fit right in. It was such a great record.
It was.
Like, we didn't feel weird about, like, their direction.
Yeah, that New York mining disaster song was great.
So
love
beautiful.
That record. I have that first record.
Yeah, so beautiful.
It's fantastic.
You know, Ed, I won't ruin the documentary for you, but at the very end, Barry he talks about his legacy, like kind of currently, and he really says we're songwriters.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't get into
You just ruined the documentary for him, even though you said you weren't.
No, but he knows that because that it was, you know, we all knew them to be hit makers, but they really kind of were into writing songs.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Beautiful.
So that must have been amazing. God, I wish I could. And Albie Galutin is always this mythical character for me. Because
he is a mythical character. Yeah.
No, but A, because his name is so insane.
Yeah.
But B, because he was just some guy who showed up out of nowhere in this disco thing and then started making huge records, and I never knew.
But he was a monster musician. I think he was a real player.
He's a keyboard player.
Yeah, he was a real monster keyboard player.
Right.
Well, absolutely. So that was a great experience. Working with Roy and inspiring me for the ambience, and then observing. I didn't work on the Bee Gees record. I observed. I was just hanging out and just observing them doing vocals. Amazing. It was impeccably done. The production was impeccably done. That's Stephen Stills playing percussion on You Should Be Dancing.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How interesting.
And it's a bunch of percussion. There's a whole shit. There was 2 tracks. It was they bounced it down. You know, it was all in stereo. But he, like Hunga and shakers, tambourines, it was all on 2 tracks. It was very cool. So anyway, you know, I was up there for just under a year. Andre Perry was, an audio legend in Canada. Andre Perry recorded "Give Peace a Chance" in the hotel bedroom.
Oh wow!
Yeah, live.
Wow.
Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah.
On his iPhone?
Yeah, did it on his iPhone. It was great. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he had I think it was just like 2-track stereo.
And so Tony comes back into the picture.
Yeah,
You come back from Canada?
Yes. 1976, summer of 76. I moved back from Canada. Tony said, "Hey, me and Bob Walters, we're leaving Media Sound, and we're going to build a studio in New York. We're going to build a new studio. And how would you like to be chief engineer?" And they're, "Well, oh, you're going to pay me?" They ended up paying for my moving expenses and put me on salary.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, and I think I never talked to Clear Mountain about this, but I bet he said the same thing to Clear Mountain. "Hey, you want to be chief engineer at this new studio?"
Right.
You know, I never thought about it, but you know, we were the original team, as I mentioned earlier, was Tony Bon Jovi, Bob Walters, Bobby Clear Mountain, Ed Evans, technical director, and myself.
That's got some Mount Rushmore shit right there.
Yeah, right.
Can you imagine? No, but seriously, think about those 5 heads on a fucking rock.
Mount Bushmore.
Were you involved in the design of the rooms? Or?
Yes. I'm sure to Tony Bon Jovi's chagrin, it was actually my idea to build a large room because of being working at media a little bit, and the Roy Thomas Baker thing with room sound.
Right.
But it was the building was actually like a Con Ed building?
It was a Con Ed distribution. It was a power station. And
Right.
I even came up with the name. I said, just name it Power
There you
Station.
go.
I did.
That's amazing.
This is a true story because, I wouldn't bullshit. I'm not a bullshitter. And I do have, matter of fact, Berkeley has taken over Power Station,
Yes.
Berkeley
Yeah.
at Power Station, New York City, and I just recently came across my original concept drawing for the room, which my idea was a pyramid with the isolation rooms in the back, similar, and I presented that to the architects, and I have the original architect.
Right.
I have the blueprints. Granted, Tony did go to great lengths to actually design the room.
Right.
Yeah.
But conceptually, it came from my background somehow.
Yeah.
Those sliding glass doors. That was
Fantastic.
a record plant thing. I copped that from Record Plant in L.A. when I had been there. They put me on salary, and we started looking for buildings. And Tony was working all the time. So myself and Bob Walters. Bob would call me up, says, "Come into town. We got to check out some building here." Finally arrived at Power Station. I remember going in there with Tony, and Tony's original idea was to put in where Studio A is, to put in 2 floors, to build a low ceiling, and then put 2 studios on top of each other. And I said, no. My immediate reaction was, let's make it a big room. Mine was a pyramid. It wasn't the dome. That Tony came up with that idea for sure. Matter of fact, I've been in touch with Stephen Weber at Power Station, New York, and I'm donating the blueprints of my original drawings.
Oh, beautiful.
Oh, nice.
They're going to have a gallery there.
Great.
So great.
Pat myself on the back. Okay, Ed, that's enough of that.
I've been working there the last couple of weeks.
Oh, really?
Oh, you have?
Yeah,
What have you been
I
doing
have.
there? What have
I've
you
been
been doing?
doing Mrs. Maisel,
Oh, great.
and I've been in A, and it's so great.
It's a
Yeah.
beautiful.
It is what it
beautiful
ever. It's the same.
Yep.
And there's nothing. You never walk around and go, I wish there was. It just is.
Yeah.
There's nothing you really want that's not already there. Like they left the rooms down to the carpet on the walls. They left it. Ed, both you guys would walk in there and go, this is exactly how I always remember it.
And then
And
is
thank
it
you for doing that.
Is it easy to book it, Stuart? Like, is it like you just book it in advance like a regular studio, even though it's a school, or how does that work?
No, all the 3 rooms are A, B, and C upstairs are just like a regular studio. And you don't book
Great.
it through the school. You book it through Power Station.
Oh,
But it's
cool, okay.
amazing that it still exists. Mm-hmm. And I can't even imagine when you walked in. I mean, we all know where these studios exist right now, but when you walked in, it was just floors. Like, was it empty?
It was empty. It had been being used as a television studio. And
okay.
it was a big sound stage where Studio A is. Big sound stage with lighting rigs and everything going on there. No lights, just the rigging was left. I remember walking in there and going, "Oh, this is the fucking space." For the first
Right.
time. I went in there with Bob Walters originally. Then we all went back together, and I think they bought that building for like $300,000.
Amazing.
Fuck me.
Seriously.
Smart move.
Yeah.
And were all the studios built at the same time?
No,
All the-
we built Studio A first.
Right.
Studio A was going up. They were working on the actual recording room, the dome, during the day, and we built the control room first. And there's a booth next to on the, if you're looking out on the right side, there's a booth there. We built those first, and that was all done. And so the control room was working, and the first project that was done there was mixing the Ramones' "Rocket to Russia." You know, it was like a year.
Wow.
It was a year after they brought me back. You know, I did several projects with Tony. The first Ramones project was "Leave Home." And that was started in November of '76. And it's because of Bon Jovi that I'm associated with the Ramones. I owe Bon Jovi, you know, my career, really, really do. You know, throwing me in the pool way back when at Media Sound, and then, you know, bringing me down to be on the Power Station team and work with the Ramones. And he's like, "Hey, Eddie,
Amazing.
I'm going to do this band called the Ramones. You want to produce it with me?" Yeah, you know, I thought I was producing, you know. Yeah, of course, when I get the record back, they, you know, engineer Ed Stasium. And they spell my name wrong, I think. That's okay.
And did you go to like CBs and see them? Like, were you familiar with them?
I did not. It was, Tony somehow got me other gigs as well, not working with him. I was up in Canada, and I wasn't there for the first day of tracking. I hadn't heard the Ramones. I didn't know anything about them. I was busy doing all sorts of shit. It's kind of a blur. But I do remember the first time I heard them. Matter of fact, Bob Clearmountain set up the date. He was in. I couldn't get there for the first day of tracking, so Bob set up. He didn't even remember when I was doing the box set. I'm looking. I didn't even remember, and I looked. Oh, Clearmountain. It's his writing, and you know, BC on the. It was at Sundragon, a little tiny fucking room, 16-track Studer with a Roger Mayer console, and you know, a bit of outboard gear. You know, LA2. One Pultec, that kind of thing. Good microphone selection. And Bob set up the date, and the first time I heard the Ramones was going in the next day, and with Bob and him explaining to me, okay, this is, you know, this is what we did yesterday. And for some reason, when he hit play, he started playing it for me, and the volume was really loud. It was like, bam! Threw me across the fucking room, you know. Here we are with Commando or something. Oh my God, what is this? What is this? And I was perplexed. I really was. I was perplexed at first. But then, you know, once I started working on this stuff, it was like, oh shit, I love this. This is great. Because I always wanted to be a rock star, a guitar player in a band, you know, and I did that for years. And, you know, I'm not that good. You know, I'm an okay rhythm player. The guys came in and really, you know, I got along with them just great. They're all my age, same age as me. We're all influenced by the same shit, from, you know, Alice Cooper to the Beatles to the Stones and, you know, to Iggy and the Stooges. And we all had the same influence. And, but the first time I heard the Ramones was in the control room at Sundragon the day after Bobby set up the date. Yeah. And they had cut a couple songs. And then we cut the rest of them in like 2 days. Boom, knocked them out.
And what was the like working environment like? They would just go out and play, do a couple of takes, and like they didn't fret over anything, right?
Never, no, just do the take. That's good. Next, that's good. Next, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And
And were the songs written? Like,
yes. Oh yeah.
They were all.
No, matter of fact, the songs for Leave Home were written at the same time as the first record. All the songs, they've been performing all those songs, and they were written, you know, before, you know, going to the studio, and they were written at the same time as all the songs from the first record.
Right.
From what I understand.
From that flashback of when you first heard them, first meeting them, to the fact that right now they are as big a legend as almost any rock band.
They're bigger. They're bigger than they ever were. You see pink, sparkly Ramones shirts on grandmothers at the supermarket.
Right.
I do.
That's so amazing.
And, you know, I can't tell you, I don't get out that much anymore, but, you know, how many times I've heard I want to be sedated in grocery stores.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, that's fantastic.
it's unbelievable. And, you know, you hear that, and then, you know, they'll come up with like a Kenny Loggins is next or something.
Yeah.
Or Phil Collins.
But even as a cultural, it was obviously musical, but they sort of found their way into modern culture in this almost the smartest possible way. Like they did it completely on their terms.
Right.
Seemingly.
They did
Almost, I know it's probably somewhat calculated, but it seems after the initial calculation, it was just like, we're going to do this. And
They did it. They had freaking uniforms.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, like like the Beatles had their suits, the Ramones had their T-shirts and ripped jeans, and they had ripped jeans, and it became, you're seeing it today.
Yeah,
You
for
know,
like
people-
$200 a pair, right?
But I think it's so funny because it's so simple, but like you guys said, so smart and calculated, but so like free. I could never understand them, but then I realized how awesome they were.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what I mean? Like just the fact that the chords were very simple and
Yeah, but you know what? The time changes were really out there.
Right.
You know, Pinhead, dan, da, 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 dan, 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 all these very. I'm not a musician, so I don't know, 4/4/8/4, whatever, all that stuff. I don't know that stuff. I know what feels good, but some of that shit is crazy.
Yeah. Was that Tommy? Was he?
Tommy is the architect of the Ramones. I mean, they all are a contributing factor for sure. But Tommy with that boom bop boom boom bop boom bop boom boom bop all the time. You know, and Tommy played very lightly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, very lightly.
Wow.
It's like he's not a basher. He just
Interesting.
very subdued guy, very subdued personality as well. But he is the architect, and he was a writer on a lot of the early stuff with Dee Dee. Johnny contributed a little bit, but just as wacky. On there, I'd done some of these Joey Ramone birthday bash. You do stuff like Warthog. I mean, these crazy time changes, out of the ordinary chord changes. And, people say 3 chords, but there's more than 3 chords in Ramone songs.
Right.
A lot of them.
Right.
I mean, some of them, Sheena, there's 3 chords in Sheena.
right.
But, some of the other stuff, like Pinhead, Happy Family.
I once went to see, I don't know if you remember, Vince Scelsa used to do the songwriters thing at the bottom line, and like songwriters in the circle.
Okay.
And one night he had, so Joey was on one of them.
Uh-huh.
Who knows if it's true or not, but so I'm sitting there and they're asking Joey, of course, Vince says, look, I want to be sedated, so you got to tell me how you wrote that. And he said, well, we were going to a gig one night and the van was late and I had to take a shit. So I went to take a shit while I'm waiting for the van, and by the time I came out, I wrote it.
Oh, my God. Yeah, I've heard different stories about the origins of Sedated. That's a good one. That's a really good one.
That is a good one.
Yeah, that is a great one. Yeah. Vince Scelsa became a fan of the band. He actually smashed the record on the air when he first at WNAW.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a kind of a famous story. He's like, "What is this shit?" and smashed the record on the air.
No kidding.
Yeah. He changed his mind though.
Came around.
He came around.
Gotta come around.
Yeah. Joey used to write on a 1-string guitar,
Amazing.
and he carried it with him, a 1-string guitar, and just
And in the studio, like through the years, because you made a lot of records with them, would they get involved in mixing? Like, were they interested in that, or they just
Tommy was around. Craig Leon did a great job doing the first record, and then I don't know the reasoning, but they wanted to work with a different producer for the second record, Leave Home. And Tommy was an assistant at Record Plant when Tony Bon Jovi worked at Record Plant. He worked with Hendrix. I forgot what else he did, but he knew of Tony, and he knew that Tony was a producer. So from Tommy's point of view, what Tommy told me was, well, he's the only producer I really knew.
Right.
Besides Craig
go.
Leon. And we didn't want to work with Craig, and so I got a hold of Tony. And what a good idea it was, because that's how I got involved, from Tony. From Alan Schwartzberg, from me, I've been really lucky. Just a little bit of talent and a whole lot of fucking luck I've had. Being at the right place, the right time, a lot of the time.
Yeah, but back to my point about something happens.
Yeah.
You make these records, and you're a part of it, whether you feel a certain way about your contribution or not. You are at the helm.
Yeah, you gotta be good to be lucky. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Lucky, yes, but
It's because I love to do it. I've always loved recording. When I was a kid, I was influenced by the sound of records. You know, I remember hearing like the Peter Gunn theme and Mr. Lucky, and like, coming over the radio and say, "Wow, that's got a great sound to it."
Wait, how does the Peter Gunn theme go again? Okay, great.
And I find out years later that Al Schmidt, of course, you know, he started when he was 16. He engineered those suckers. Our Uncle Al, amazing! What a great guy. You know, I remember reverb. I remember, we're going back, but just hearing stereo for the first time. The first stereo record I ever purchased was "Help" by the Beatles. This is a cool kind of story. We only had a record player in the house. Okay, it was a green metallic Webcore, 16, 33, 45, and 78. It was with a speaker, tone control, and a volume control. And I actually had one of those RCA 45 players in my room, so I could stack the 45s on there. Mm-hmm. I remember putting on "Help" and listening and going, man, there's stuff over there and there's stuff over here and there's a guitar there, but the reverb's over there. That reverb, you know. And I would just sit there and listen to one side at a time, and you know the drums would be on one side. And it was astounding to me.
Yes,
it was a revelation. It was fantastic.
So, just like back to, like when you're doing the Ramones, this is an era where we were starting to get into gated snare drums, and lots of verb, digital verb was starting to be the thing. Like when you were mixing those records, was there a conversation to be had about how the record should sound? Like, or did you just do your thing? And
I kind of just did my thing, especially for Leave Home. We recorded it all at Sundragon, probably within a 7 to 10 day period. For some reason, I was into double tracking at that time. I think I got it from probably The Who. And then on one of the earlier recordings that my band had done, I double tracked the guitar, and it's like, oh, that's really fucking cool. So I had the idea, Johnny, double track the guitars, because, just to give us something else. They didn't want it to be left and right like that first record was. Wanted it to be a little more stereo, but, we didn't want it to be mono. So we came up with the idea of let's double track Johnny. And Johnny double tracked all of the songs for Leave Home, probably in less amount of time than it would to take a fucking subway from Queens to Manhattan.
Amazing.
Just like double tracked them all. Then we did Joey's vocals, a couple background vocals. I did a couple guitar parts. Just some slightly little things that Johnny, and any guitar parts that I did on a Ramones record was under Johnny's, basically under his supervision.
Right.
He would always ask me to do stuff.
So wait, where was Sundragon?
Sundragon's on 20th Street between 5th and 6th. It was a jingle.
Oh, okay.
It was a jingle place. Tiniest room, carpeted to the hilt, dead as a doornail.
Right.
And we mixed Leave Home. We did it there was a place called Track Recorders in Silver Springs, Maryland. We did like 4 songs there. Then I went back up to the studio Morin Heights to mix the rest of it.
Wow.
And mixed a lot of it on the Trident console up there. And Tony came up with us. But Tommy and I would be doing the brunt of the work. Right. And there was, boy, this is kind of pre-digital stuff. I mean, there. I remember having Eventide. I remember the Omnipressor and the Eventide digital delay. I remember we got one of those at Camillo's. We got one of the first ones. I guess it was like probably in '74.
With the digital readout or just the bucket knobs?
No, it had a digital readout.
So it was the 1745M.
Okay, that could be.
Yeah.
You would know, being close to the business.
Yeah, close enough.
With your brother and all that business. But digital reverbs, I guess they didn't. We had at the studio, we had a couple plates, a couple 140s, and the Goldfoil 240. Is that what that is?
Yep.
The Goldfoil, they call it the Goldfoil. And
that's the little remote one that you roll around.
Yeah.
Those are great.
Yeah. And then there's the R2D2 one, which I never ever used.
The 250, yeah.
250, yeah. So there wasn't a lot of on those early Ramones records. It was all plate. Right. There were no digital reverbs on that. And as a matter of fact, jumping ahead a little bit to when we mixed Rocket to Russia at Power Station, that was the first thing ever done there. There was hardly any gear. We had a rack of Keepexes, and I always did. I got into we got Keepexes at Camillo's, and I would always bring up 2 faders. I would have the natural sound, and then I would have a gated sound and a compressor. I would compress before the gate. to make it snap a little bit. So, but I would have two. I wouldn't just have the snare. I'd always have the original behind it.
Right.
And I kind of still do that to this day.
Right.
And when we got into mixing Rocket to Russia at Power Station, the only reverb on that record is the stairwell.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, we put a couple of 4310s in the stairwell and a couple of 87s. Yeah,
That's exciting.
That's if you hear, like, you can really hear it on Lobotomy. Lobotomy. There's a delay, a slap
so
tape,
cool.
a tape slap, but it's fed into that stairwell there.
You've gone back to these multi-tracks over the years?
I have.
Have you looked at them?
I've been doing the box sets. for
Right.
Yeah.
Leave Home, Rocket to Russia, Road to Ruin, the Spector. I'm working on the Spector record right now.
Are you going back? Are you remixing stuff?
Yeah, we did new mixes for all the boxes.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what's that like? Going back and looking at these tapes
I feel like I have more guidance from the guys behind me. You know, they're all
Interesting.
gone. They're all gone at this point.
Right. Amazing.
But I hear their voices. I can hear them talking to me. You know, and I'm trying to make it. It's just I'm making them different. You know, for Leave Home, you know, it was done kind of quickly. It was wide stereo for the double track guitars. And Tommy and I had discussions about that later on. It was something that we wish we didn't do. You know, 'cause it's like wide stereo. It's fun. It's primitive. It's cool. You know, we're kids. And double track. You know, a lot of reverb on that record. And so I dried it up. You know, didn't have as much of the double track guitar. I made it more, you know, Dee Dee and John in your face. Less overdubs. Just actually we kept all the overdubs in that one, including all the backing vocals and, you know. Fun
And they're
thing.
all 24. They're all 24.
Well, Leave Home was 16. Rocket to Russia, we tracked it at Media Sound, and that was 24 track. And this is my time to shoot for the glory of the Roy Thomas Baker, the room sound at Media. You know, I had that in there, which I didn't incorporate a lot of on the original mix. We kept it pretty in your face. Yeah, it sounds, you know, but I was able to start using room sound, and, you know, it was a fun thing. And Road to Ruin, we went back to basics on that because there was a lot of fucking overdubs. You know, Tommy and I worked on that all summer in '78, a couple months easily.
So you were saying, like, that they're in the room with you. You have their voices, but it, like, looking at these multi-tracks that obviously the track sheets have your handwriting. This is 40 years ago.
40 years, yeah. They're 40th anniversary box sets, yep.
And are you're baking them and then throwing them into Pro Tools, or you?
Warner's is taking care of all that stuff.
Right, but when they come back to you, is it on?
It's in Pro Tools.
Reel?
It's in Pro Tools. Yeah.
Right.
Right. So you're just getting Pro Tools sessions.
Yeah, 24-bit 192.
Wow.
And are the transfers? Have you had any issues with them?
None. They sound
They all
great.
sound great.
They all sound great, yeah. And Warner Brothers has been doing it for years, been putting them into Pro Tools files.
Right.
I think those dates on there are like 2012, 2013.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, what I got, yeah.
Did you work on the Phil Spector record?
I was there. I was part of the band.
Right.
One of my heroes, you know.
Yeah.
One of the first producer that I even knew about. You know, made the greatest Christmas record of mankind.
Sure.
That Christmas record is fantastic. And, you know, just the great records that they did.
What was his contribution, or did you have to step in and help?
I stepped in with the band in rehearsals. I strapped on a guitar. Johnny wanted me to come because he was aware of Phil's eccentricities, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know, all the stories back then about, you know, guns and being locked in rooms, et cetera, et cetera. And Johnny wanted me to come along. It was his idea. I got a call from Seymour. Said, Phil Spector is going to do the record. And this was after we did Rock and Roll High School. And that was when, you know, I'd been working with Tommy for the first 3 records, you know, for Leave Home, Russia, and Road to Ruin. And then when I went to do the soundtrack to Rock and Roll High School in L.A., did a Cherokee on an A-series. The Cherokee had an A-series, tried it there. I get to the studio, and here's the band, but where's Tommy? I thought Tommy would be there, and he wasn't there. There was a breakup somehow. Yeah. I didn't have any inkling that Tommy would not be there for the soundtrack record.
So was that Marky?
Marky joined on Road to Ruin.
Right.
Actually, Tommy and I co-produced Road to Ruin, co-produced and engineered. Actually, gave him engineering credit because Tommy always liked to be a little hands-on.
Yeah.
And that was, Road to Ruin was the first record with Mark, but Tommy and I co-produced that sucker. And for Rock and Roll High School, the two songs we did, I Want You Around and Rock and Roll, the original Rock and Roll High School, I expected Tommy to be at the studio, but he wasn't there. And where's Tommy? He's not coming. Okay, whatever. And then Spector did a mix of those two songs for the Rock and Roll High School soundtrack record. When it came to do the Spector record in May of '79, which was just a little while later, man, Seymour called me up, Seymour Stein, Sire Records, says, Johnny's going to call you. He wants to talk to you about, Phil Spector's going to do the record, and Johnny wants to talk with you. And Johnny didn't have a phone at home. He would always use a payphone. And he had one of those little boxes that you would hold it to the phone and be able to call long distance for free.
Right,
and
the black boxes, yeah.
Some kind of black box, had a little tone in it or something. Right. And you would get through as a carrier tone. I don't know what the hell it was, but Johnny had
the
one.
The original burner phone.
Yeah. And Johnny's going to call you in an hour. Make sure you're home. And Johnny says, we're going to work with Phil. You know, I really want you to have you there. I don't trust the guy, but, you know, Seymour thinks it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. And, you know, you've been good. We love working with you, and we want you to be on the record with us. So, okay, but I'm not an engineer. I'm basically a member of the band.
Right.
You know, Larry Levine was the engineer. Phil's long time. He did,
long time.
Larry Levine, the great late Larry Levine. Phil was driving him crazy in the studio, I'll tell you.
Did they get the band? Did they? I mean, because Phil was coming from such a different sonic world.
Phil loved the Ramones.
Amazing.
There were two brothers, the Kessel brothers, okay? These are Barney Kessel, who was a major guitar player in the Wrecking Crew. The Kessels and Phil was like their second dad. When the Ramones played, the second time they played the Whiskey with Blondie, they would switch opening acts, in '77, I think it was, they brought Phil to the show. And, you know, he was just like impressed. And then the Kessels and the Ramones on another trip they were doing a song with Rodney, and they also did a song called Slug. They produced it at Gold Star with the Ramones. But Phil wanted to, as soon as he saw the Ramones, he wanted to produce them, and was after Seymour for years to, you know, work with them. They finally worked the deal out somehow. But it's pretty much because of the Kessel brothers dragging Phil down to the Whiskey to see him.
But he didn't try to do a wall of sound thing.
He just, he did do a wall of sound in the mixing. Now, I must say, as much as I respect Phil and his eccentricities, he didn't do much as far as production. But I expected Phil Spector to have some arrangement ideas, to give a little suggestion. Say anything, Phil. And, we rehearsed for a few days at SIR in Los Angeles. I strapped my guitar on. I learned all the songs, my old trusty Stratocaster. Phil had a habit of having his assistant, Donna, call me. I was staying at those guys are staying at the Tropicana. You know the Tropicana, the famous Tropicana Hotel? It was like the rock and roll, slum. It was a funky old, it was at Santa Monica and like La Brea around there somewhere. And there was a famous restaurant. I can't think of the name of it. It was downstairs. Everybody had breakfast there. I'll think of it later. But I stayed there the first night, and then my room got broken into. I said, Seymour, I'm getting out of here. And they put me in the Sunset Marquee. So I'm at the Sunset Marquee in a little suite. It was great. Poolside. It was, I got to meet a bunch of people that were staying there. Iovine was staying there doing Damn the Torpedoes. Shelly Yakis and Jimmy Iovine were there. The Village People were there for a while. I met Eddie Money there. It was early on, Sunset Marquee kind of stuff. And I would be waiting around, and Phil's assistant would call me and say, Phil's going to call you. Phil's going to call you in 15 minutes. Make sure you answer the phone. And she would always call before he would call to let me know when he was calling. And so, okay, fine. We talked a couple times. I met with him. He was working with the Paley brothers, which I think was part of the deal that Seymour said, I'll let you do the Ramones if you do a couple tracks with the Paley brothers. Jonathan, and they're from Boston. They had a deal with Sire. They also did a song, they did a cover of Come On, Let's Go with the Ramones playing backing vocals, and Jonathan and Andy sang. It was on the Rock and Roll High School soundtrack. It's a really good version. It's really cool. So they knew the Ramones. And so Phil wanted to meet me. I go down to meet him at Gold Star. I'm so nervous. We're during the rehearsals, go and meet Phil. And we just started hanging out. They were doing something. An acoustic guitar came into the control room. And Phil he had done a couple belts. Let's put it that way. And he was a little tipsy. And get there, meet Phil. How you doing? Larry's the engineer. Meet Larry. The Paley brothers I had met previously, so it was good to see them. And we were all sitting in front of the console at Gold Star. And Phil gets the acoustic guitar and starts. He wants to sing "God Bless America" in the control room with the Paley brothers and myself. And he's trying to figure out the chords, and he can't. He's passing the guitar around. I finally figure out. I'm kind of adept at doing that kind of, so I'm figuring out how to play God Bless America. And we're all singing God Bless America in the control room. And then Phil is leaning like this on his chair and does a fucking face plant. Does a face plant.
Spector, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, Phil Spector.
Phil Spector.
That was my first meeting with Phil.
But so Gold Star was still around then?
Yes, we recorded at Gold Star on, I was just so excited. I didn't even pay attention to, I don't even know what console it was.
So he never really, he kept that as his go-to studio for all the years.
Yeah. He did the Paley Brothers stuff there. We did the whole Ramones record there. I did some overdubs at a studio in the Valley. So we're rehearsing at SAR. Donna calls me, says, Phil wants to talk to you. Phil calls me, Ed, I'm going to come down to SIR this afternoon. Okay? I'll be there at 5 o'clock. So he's coming to SIR. I figure he's going to rehearse with us a little bit. He's going to maybe do some arranging. He's going to do his Phil thing. So he comes in and with a briefcase and his bodyguard. His bodyguard stands by the door. He puts his briefcase down, sits on the briefcase. I mean, he's a frail little guy. He's a little guy. And sits on his briefcase, starts rocking. He says, okay, play the songs. And we went through the set. Next song, let me hear that. Went through the whole set, all the songs, didn't say a word. Got up at the end, said, sounds great. We'll see you tomorrow at the studio. That was it. He picked his briefcase up and left.
So weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think? But his motive for doing the record was, you think, just he was a big fan of the bands?
He was a big fan of the band, and he wanted to Spectorize it, which he did on the mixes.
Right.
We were all shocked at the mixes, except Joey, Joey loved it. But Johnny was like, where's the guitars?
Right.
And then Marky's like, I can't hear the drums are filled with reverb.
Right.
And Petey's like, ooh, sounds cool. Yeah. But it was a kind of a shock.
So so Dee Dee and Phil, how did that go?
Well, there's been a story about Dee Dee being held up at gunpoint from Phil. I don't know about this. Right. We all went up to Phil's place after Phil came down to the studio. We all went up to the next day. We went to his house, right up above Sunset Boulevard somewhere, with gates and guard dogs and all sorts of wacky shit. And there was no food. We were starving, and we thought we were going to eat up there or something. We didn't eat, and he just he kept. There was another time that Dee Dee claims that he pulled a gun on him and wouldn't let him leave. But Phil would not. He would not let us leave. He would not let us leave. He kept us up there, and we were going over songs. The guys wanted to do a Phil Spector song, and it ended up to be "Baby, I Love You." Mm. And we were just listening to that on a jukebox over and over and over. We were playing pool, hanging out, and he just kept us there forever, wouldn't let us leave. Just, no, don't go. Let's go. Let's do one more thing, you know. And we were all starving. You know, no pizzas. Apparently, on another visit, the Kessels brought up some pizzas with the band, and they had pizza up there, but not during this visit.
Yeah, he doesn't seem like a big culinary guy. Like, hey, I'll make you guys some pancakes or something.
Well, I'll tell you, you know, I had dinner with Phil practically every night during the recording sessions. And it's kind of blurry. I was just so nervous being with Phil. And he would just preach to me about how great this record was going to be. It's going to be the biggest record I ever worked on. It's going to go to #1. It's going to be the biggest record of the Ramones' career. And he would go on and on and on about this. It was, and we'd go to Hamburger Hamlet, and he'd order the same thing every night. And I would get the same thing, get French onion soup and a hamburger. And that was the culinary delights of Hamburger Hamlet.
Who paid for dinner?
Phil would always pay for dinner.
Nice.
Yeah. The entire time I was working on the project, I wanted a back to mono button. And Phil would always say, okay, just hang on. I'll get it for you, Because, I always saw Phil wearing that back to mono button. I saw John Lennon wearing one. And on the last day of recording, Phil, Ed, come here, guys. He reaches into his little bag of tricks and pulls out this folded piece of paper. And in that paper was, lo and behold, the back to mono button.
Wow.
With a signed.
Oh, great.
From the desk of Phil Spector, Ed, enjoy. There's his back to mono button.
From Fantastic. The rolls of Phil Spector.
Yes, from the rolls of Phil Spector. Yes, indeed.
I was really curious about your experience with the Talking Heads, which was another, the other seminal band at that point or something.
Yeah, that was back in, that was part of the, Tony Bon Jovi trip, the whole, coming down from Canada and starting up Power Station. And in the interim, we would do different things.
Was that their first record?
Yeah, I worked on their first, and we actually did the single as well. Love Goes to Building on Fire. Part of the deal, coming back from Canada and being Bon Jovi's sidekick was engineering projects for him. So probably in the spring of '77, Talking Heads came into the picture as a trio before Jerry.
Right.
Wow. We went into Sundragon again, where we had recorded Ramones' Leave Home. It was at the same time. We did a song called Love Goes to Building on Fire. And Tommy Ramone co-produced that as well, which was nice to have Tommy around because we had become pretty good friends at that time. And we popped into the studio at Sundragon and recorded the single, did the whole thing in a day, although they put horns on it. Brad Baker, I think, did the horn arrangement.
And the band was cool with that?
Yeah, they were. It's a cool little record. We did it really quick. Boom. They did, did the horns, I think probably the next day, and did the mix the same day we did the horns, and came out as a single and Picture Sleep.
I mean, it's interesting that the Talking Heads and the Ramones, they were Bowery bands. They were coming out of CB's at the same time. But they were coming in your direction, right? I mean, you were...
Well, they came in my direction because of Tony Bon Jovi. And they also came into the direction of Tony Bon Jovi because of Seymour Stein had signed both of the bands at Sire. Talking Heads were also a Sire band.
Right.
Seymour had wanted to sign them for some time, and then finally in the spring of '77 got a hold of them.
Was it evident right away to you in the studio as to how great they were going to be? And
it was another project to do, and I pretty much have loved everything that I've done. So I'm very lucky in that way. They certainly had a quirkiness and freshness about them. Chris was an amazing drummer, though, I have to say. Mm-hmm. The time that he kept was quite amazing. Shortly after we did the single, we started working on the album at Sundragon. And Lance Quinn, Tony and Lance were the co-producers with the band. And I recall Lance sitting, there's a little stopwatch built into the Sundragon console. And he would start it and stop it, let a bar go by, 1, 2, 3, 4, stop it. And he was amazed at the fact that it was so accurate. Chris's playing was so accurate, and we weren't working with a click track.
And was Tony very hands-on with them?
No.
Was it David's kind of thing?
Well, Lance was involved, and he was kind of hands-on. He was there, but it was the band's thing. When we started to record vocals, Tony tried to be hands-on with David Byrne and give him some guidance, and that didn't fly. As I recall, David got very upset at Tony because of this guidance he was trying to give him. You know, why do you want me to try to sing like a pop singer?
Right.
And he refused to have Tony in the studio when vocals were being done. I don't even think Lance was in the studio when we did vocals. It was just, you know, David and I and the tape machine did all the vocals.
And they must have been fairly green in the studio.
Oh, yeah.
I would assume.
Yeah, it was the first time in the studio.
Right.
I think they had done some demos that eventually showed up on one of their compilations, the Sand and the Vaseline compilation.
Were they involved in mixing?
They all came by for mixing. We mixed it at Media Sound. This is a funny little story. When I went to mix Talking Head 77, I had previously worked with Genya Ravon on her solo record.
She was super popular back then and playing at CB's, and she was
a producer, a great producer. Yeah. You know, she did the first Dead Boys record. She worked with Ronnie Spector. I haven't spoken to her in several years, but she's still a good friend. You know, we hung out a lot. I actually crashed at her apartment on the couch many times because, you know, back in those days, you'd be up all fucking night, and I wasn't about to drive back to New Jersey. But it's the first song on her record, Urban Desire. And she wanted to start it differently. It started kind of weak. So we had looped a guitar part, like a dunk, 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 into a eventide. What was the first digital delays?
1745M or A or
probably one of those. It was, and you had the loop function. So I did a thing, and it was going diddle 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 diddle. It was repeating and repeating. And I had done this, like I had finished Genya's record like in the springtime, probably around the same time we did Love Goes to Building on Fire. And so we went to mix Talking Head 77 in July of 77. A few months have gone by, and so we start to mix. And I wanted to plug in the eventide, the digital delay. And lo and behold, that fucking sample was still in there. It was in there for like 3 months. Nobody had touched it. The power didn't go out. So I pull it up, put it up on the faders. It's like diddle, 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 diddle. What the hell? It's pretty funny. Another interesting, cool thing that happened during the mixing of 77 was that, you know, Sundragon was a very tight, small, carpeted, dead room. And he said, Ed, can we make the drums sound more ambient? What we did was we took like probably a 4310 or 4311 with a crown, and I fed the drums, notably the kick and snare, out to the big room at Media Sound and brought it in.
Oh, cool.
Up on 2 faders. It was 16 track, mind you. And I put it through a pair of keypexes, basically to gate the noise out, but at that time, it was like, oh, this is really cool. You can trigger it and make the decay time as much as you want because it was a big room. On Psycho Killer, you can hear it. On the snare drum, if you listen closely.
Do you remember what you used on his vocal when you mixed?
At that time, which I still am, I was into changing reverbs in choruses and verses and, you know, emphasizing words with sends. And of course, at this time, it was all manual.
Yeah.
So I would do the send or do the return. I'd move it. You can hear it. If you listen, I don't remember what I did in what song. That was a long time ago. But I do remember last week. I definitely remember in the chorus where it goes da 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 da. Well, yeah. I put a different like a reverb, like a delay through a tape, through a reverb, through a plate. And I got that idea from, you know, Jeff Emmerich on a Paul McCartney. I think it was. Hands across the water. Yeah, I was emulating something I remember that Jeff Emmerich did on that mix. The reverb really changed. It was a delay going through a plate. And I did the same thing on that one song last week.
Do you go back and revisit these records?
No.
Psycho Killer you probably hear at the 7-Eleven occasionally, right?
I hear it at the supermarket, definitely.
Right.
I always hear Sedated.
Right.
Right.
So do you stand there and listen and go, fuck the guitar on the left or that the ice machine is in the way of that over there?
I can't tell you how many times I stood under 2 speakers in a supermarket and go, those fuckers are out of phase.
Yeah. Yeah. Me and Stewie want to thank all you Gear Clubbers for listening to this crazy podcast we do. If you can, leave a review on iTunes. It really makes a difference. And don't be shy. We love hearing from you guys on the social media at Gear Club Podcast. Don't forget to go to gearclubpodcast.com for Spotify playlists, links and photos for the episodes, and my favorite hot sauce of the month.